The apartment that drips color. The building was ordinary from the street, gray and silent, but the moment I stepped inside, the walls seemed to pulse like a living canvas. A faint hum followed me up the stairs, like a distant organ tuning itself in a forgotten cathedral. The door to my apartment was closed, but behind it, I could hear soft sloshing, as if liquid moved beneath the floorboards. I opened it, and the air smelled sweet and metallic, thick with something I could not name. The walls bled color, vibrant reds, electric blues, and sickly greens, dripping down in slow, viscous rivers. I reached to touch one of the streams, and it felt warm, almost alive, sliding over my fingers like liquid skin. It left traces on me, faint impressions of shapes that were not mine, memories that whispered in languages I almost recognized. The floor rippled beneath my weight, and the colors formed small faces, each blinking once before disappearing into the next cascade. A lamp flickered, casting shadows that did not match their objects, twisting around corners and curling along the ceiling like black smoke. I heard a knock from inside the apartment itself, soft but deliberate, though no one else could possibly be here. The hum grew louder, swelling into a chorus of voices that merged with the dripping walls, forming words that pressed against my skull. I stepped back, and the walls reacted, stretching and curling toward me as if inhaling. Each color seemed to pulse with intention, green spirals forming eyes that followed my every movement. The paint on the ceiling pooled downward, forming grotesque hands that reached for the light, leaving streaks of color behind. I ran to the window, but the glass rippled like liquid, reflecting scenes I had never lived through. My reflection stared back, but the colors in my hair and eyes were wrong, shifting between red, purple, and black in impossible gradients. The whispers became voices, recounting moments of my life I could not remember, twisting them into stories that made no sense. The door slammed shut on its own, and the hum became a scream, reverberating through every corner of the apartment. Shadows pooled at the base of the walls, twisting upward into shapes that were almost human, almost animal, but never fully one or the other. I stumbled toward the bathroom, only to see the tiles ripple like water, its faces forming and vanishing as the colors leaked into each other. A faucet turned on, but instead of water, thick crimson liquid poured, forming small pools that reflected impossible skies. The mirror refused to show me my reflection, instead displaying a figure standing behind me, moving only when I blinked. I tried to run, but the hallway elongated, stretching impossibly, colors dripping along the edges like the building itself was bleeding. Each step forward left traces on the floor, fingerprints that glowed faintly, shifting and twisting into grotesque shapes. I tripped over a puddle, and the liquid pulled at my hands, leaving faint impressions that would never wash away. The hum coalesced into a singular voice, soft and coaxing, promising understanding if I would only step closer to the largest pool of color in the living room. I resisted, but my body moved on its own, drawn toward the swirling vortex of reds, greens, and blues, my fingers nearly touching the living paint. Suddenly, the colors shot upward, forming a vortex that enveloped the ceiling, walls, and floor, blurring the edges of reality into something impossible. Faces emerged in the swirl, screaming silently, some with my own features twisted grotesquely, staring at me from the moving tapestry. I felt a pull in my chest, like my own memories were being unstitched, drawn into the painting along with the voices and faces. I closed my eyes, willing myself to wake, and when I opened them, the apartment was still, the colors settling into faint streaks, as if exhausted. A single drop of color fell from the ceiling, landing on my hand and leaving a faint warmth. A reminder that the apartment had not forgotten me. I left quickly, but as I closed the door behind me, I felt it watching, the colors inside pulsing faintly, waiting for my return. The statues that blink. The park was empty when I arrived, but the statues were already watching. Their eyes reflected the moonlight with a shimmer that felt alive, like oil moving over water. One of them moved slightly as I blinked, a hand curling around a stone railing that had been untouched moments ago, bending in a way stone should never bend. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, faintly sweet. I stepped closer to a marble figure of a child, its face innocent yet impossibly detailed, and its head tilted toward me, the eyes following without moving the body. Every path through the park seemed to bend around the statues, the trees leaning in as if listening, and the shadows twisting to fill spaces they should not occupy. A faint whisper drifted across the grass, carried by the wind. I reached out toward a statue of an old man, and the fingers flexed slightly, forming depressions and patterns too deliberate to be natural. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, but its echo came from the statues themselves. From a corner, a statue I had not noticed before stepped forward, a figure of a young woman, her eyes blinking once, no, twice, then staring as if they remembered me, reflecting dozens of faces that were not mine, but somehow familiar. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned, only statues remained, frozen yet somehow aware, each one angled slightly toward me. One figure, a man holding a lantern, tilted the flame toward my feet. The whispers became voices, low and coaxing, recounting moments of my life that had never happened, blending truth and nightmare seamlessly. I stumbled toward the exit, but the gates were gone, replaced by walls that stretched upward. A bench lifted itself slightly, hovering a few inches above the ground before settling. I ran past a fountain, and the water rose to form faces, screaming silently, ripples distorting the park into something unreal and grotesque. The wind carried laughter, not human, not animal, but something between, echoing from the stones themselves, and I realized the park had remembered me. I tripped over a tree root, or maybe it was a statue's arm reaching through the earth. The lantern figure floated closer, and the flame split into dozens of miniature eyes, each watching my every movement, blinking in impossible synchrony. I pressed my hands to my ears as the voices rose, overlapping, layering into a choir of whispers and screams that resonated from every corner. The ground itself seemed alive, sinking and swelling under my feet, guiding me to the fountain's edge, where water now poured upward like gravity had reversed. Faces formed in the fountain, grotesque imitations of townsfolk I had seen. I stumbled backward, and a statue of a child reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve, leaving a faint warmth, almost a pulse, that I could not explain. The whispers condensed into a single phrase, low and deliberate, repeating over and over, "We have been waiting." The lantern figure floated directly before me, flame eyes burning, and I realized every statue. When I finally collapsed onto the ground, the statues gathered around. The park fell silent, but even now, I know they are watching. The Church of Twisted Candles. The bell tower had been blackened for decades, its iron frame warped, yet the wind carried the faintest hollow toll as if it remembered prayers long forgotten. I first noticed the church on a fog-heavy evening, its silhouette jutting from the hillside like a broken tooth against the pale moon. The door was ajar, though I knew it had been sealed the day before. The hinges groaned as if complaining about my intrusion. Inside, the air was thick with wax and decay. Its candles burned with unnatural colors, green flames licking the shadows, red dripping down the walls like frozen blood. Faces formed in the melting wax. I thought it was the flicker of candlelight, but they were too deliberate, too human, too aware. I stepped closer, and one face seemed to breathe. Taz widened, staring directly at me, yet no mouth moved to speak. A whisper came from nowhere. My name, drawn out, slow and careful, curling around my ears like smoke from a funeral pyre. Shadows in the nave began shifting independently, stretching and curling against the stone, forming shapes that had no business existing. Every candle I passed seemed to watch me, flames bending toward me, as if leaning to overhear my thoughts. A single candle fell over behind me. I turned, expecting wax on stone, but it hovered, tilting upright, moving as though on invisible fingers. I tried to leave, but the door slammed shut, metal striking stone with a finality that echoed like a gunshot through the empty hall. The whispers multiplied, overlapping, weaving stories I did not recognize. Histories that weren't mine, yet I felt them coil inside my mind. I reached the altar. The crucifix was intact, yet the figure was elongated, limbs bent in impossible angles, eyes hollow but aware. Wax pooled at my feet, forming shapes that resembled small animals, cats, birds, rats, yet they twisted unnaturally. Nothing breathed. One shadow detached itself from the wall, moved ahead of me, stretching toward a pew, curling over as if inspecting some hidden object I could not see. The air grew warmer, the candle flames dancing violently, casting the ceiling into a kaleidoscope of reds, greens, and sickly yellows. I heard a choir singing not from speakers, not from any choir loft, but rising from the wax itself, voices pressed together in agony and ecstasy. Each note burned my ears, yet demanded that I follow, drawing me closer to the twisted candles along the side aisles. I reached out to touch one, and it detached itself from its holder, floating upward, its flame forming a miniature face that screamed silently. Behind it, the other candles swayed in rhythm, forming a grotesque congregation of light, each face writhing, a shadow pulsating with something alive. The smell of burnt hair and incense mingled, thick and choking, pulling memories of childhood churches that had never existed into my mind. Stumbled toward the exit, but the shadows had formed a corridor, impossible angles bending the space, each step forward folding the floor beneath me. I tripped, hands scraping against pews that were not solid, fingers sinking through, grasping only air and faint warmth, as if the furniture had a pulse. The whispers crescendoed into a scream, and the faces in the wax turned toward me, mouths opening impossibly wide, eyes rolling into the backs of their heads. One candle floated down in front of me, flames licking my chest without burning. Its wax dripped onto my hands, leaving a trace of memories that were not mine. The crucifix leaned forward slightly, and I felt its hollow eyes pierce through me, measuring something intangible, weighing my fear against the air of the church. I closed my eyes, trying to summon rationality, and when I opened them, the candles had aligned into a path toward the altar, each flame bowing toward me as if expecting a gesture I did not know. The final candle hovered over the altar, its flame splitting into dozens of smaller faces, each screaming, each whispering, each looking for something they could not find. I turned to run, but the door was no longer where it had been. The stone walls bent impossibly, corridors repeating, mirrors forming on the surfaces, showing me endlessly trapped. I heard the bell toll once more, hollow and dry. The shadows lunged, the wax faces reaching, the choir's wail shaking the very air from my lungs. A hand, not my own, touched my shoulder. I spun, and there was nothing, yet I felt the weight of every candle, every shadow, every whisper pressing against me. When I finally stumbled outside, the church was silent, black against the moon. But a single candle burned at the doorway, twisted flame alive, as if waiting for my next visit. The lake that colors the moon. The lake looked ordinary at first, still and quiet, but when I stepped closer, the reflection of the moon was wrong. Deep reds bleeding into purples, the surface rippling in impossible patterns. Mist clung to the shoreline, thick and heavy, carrying a faint metallic temps, as if the water itself exhaled something alive. I knelt at the edge, and my fingers broke the surface. The water was warm, unnervingly so, and it left a faint pulse on my skin. My reflection stared back, but the face was subtly different, eyes larger, lips thinner, shadows carved into the cheeks that should not exist. I blinked, and the reflection moved slightly out of sync, grinning when I did not, frowning when I smiled. A ripple expanded from the center, forming concentric rings that stretched and bent the forested shoreline into impossible angles. I tried to pull my hand back, but the water clung, coating my fingers in a viscous film that shimmered with shifting colors. The moon itself seemed to warp, elongating and twisting, turning from silver to a palette of deep crimson, green, and black, bleeding into the night. I stumbled back, but the reflection did not. It reached forward, fingers stretching impossibly, brushing the water in a way that seemed to distort reality itself. Whispers rose from the lake, not words I understood, but syllables that pressed against my memory, tugging at names I had never heard but felt familiar. The shoreline shifted, sand rising and falling as if breathing, forming shapes, chairs, doors, and windows that had no reason to exist there. The water began to boil slightly, bubbles forming faces, each screaming silently, features contorting as if animated by unseen hands. I took a step back, and the mist thickened, curling around my legs like slow serpents, tugging me closer to the lake's edge. A tree leaned over the water unnaturally, branches bending in impossible arcs, casting shadows that moved independently of the moon. The reflection smiled wider, and I realized it was not just my face it mirrored, but an amalgam of every person who had ever looked into the lake. Colors pulsed along the surface, spreading outward in fractal patterns, each ripple forming grotesque shapes that twisted into faces, animals, and forms I could not name. I leaned closer, hypnotized, and saw a figure in the water rising. It's translucent yet horrifyingly real, fingers dripping with the same viscous, pulsing colors. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of iron and smoke, though no fire burned. And the mist now formed shapes that crawled along the surface like living shadows. I stumbled backward, but the ground beneath me felt fluid, shifting like wet clay, guiding me toward the center of the lake. A sudden gust of wind revealed faint laughter. I pitched, echoing from somewhere beneath the water, as if the lake itself had a voice. Ripples formed letters on the surface, twisting and curling before my eyes, spelling names I had never known, yet that felt intimately familiar. Us. I reached toward a face forming in the water, and it recoiled, pulling at me with unseen strength, as though the lake was alive and aware of my presence. The moonlight reflected on the water like molten metal, and the lake began to undulate violently, waves forming impossible arcs, folding space into itself. Shadows on the shore stretched unnaturally, bending over me, merging with the mist, whispering promises I could not refuse. I fell to my knees, fingers brushing the edge, and the water responded, forming a vortex of color that pulled at my vision, memories, and body. Each face in the water screamed silently, echoing through my skull, eyes opening impossibly wide, staring directly into mine. I tried to step back, but the shoreline had changed. Hills and trees that had never existed now pressed close, enclosing the lake like a cage. The mist condensed, forming a figure, pale and impossible, rising from the water, limbs stretching in ways that should not exist. I felt my reflection twist and split, two versions of myself staring back, both reaching forward, mouths moving silently as if calling me to join them. I stumbled, and the ground beneath me rippled like water, forming a small pool that reflected another world entirely. Brighter, yet grotesque in impossible ways. A final ripple expanded across the lake, carrying colors that sank into my vision, my skin, my thoughts, until I realized I could no longer distinguish reality from the reflection. I ran, or perhaps I fell, the mist curling around me, the lake pulsing behind me. But even as I escaped its edge, I knew the colors were still watching, waiting for the next glance.